Silver Creek had always been a place where everyone knew each other, and secrets seemed to be rare. But on September 15th, 2023, the town was plunged into one of the worst nightmares imaginable. A family once considered a model for the community was torn apart by dark passion, hidden resentments, and a shocking act of violence. This was the home of Emma and Lucas Hansen, a house that many saw as the embodiment of the perfect life. Emma Hansen was a successful real estate agent, and her husband Lucas, a prominent lawyer in Silver Creek. But behind their facade of success lay dark secrets that had been simmering for years, secrets that eventually led to tragedy. Sophie Wilson, Emma's younger sister, had returned to Silver Creek a year earlier, in September 2022, to reconnect with her family. No one could have predicted that her return would trigger a chain reaction that would lead to an irreversible tragedy. Starting in the spring of 2023, Sophie and Lucas began meeting secretly in an abandoned cabin on the outskirts of town. These encounters quickly became something more than casual conversations. Hidden passions, deep-seated grievances, and their mutual desire to change their lives set off a series of events that no one could stop. While Emma remained unaware, her life became increasingly tangled in a web of lies, betrayal, and obsession. And though September 15th was supposed to be just another ordinary day, it became the day when all the hidden conflicts came to the surface, culminating in a tragic conclusion. One witness, a local bartender, recalls seeing Lucas and Sophie together late at night at the pub. Their behavior seemed too close for a brother-in-law and sister-in-law. They acted strange. I saw them more than once, but it always seemed too intense, like they were trying to hide from someone, the witness shared. September 15th, 2023 would become a turning point in this story. On that day, no one would leave the Hansen household unchanged, and the small town of Silver Creek would forever lose its innocence. The sisters' childhood had begun like that of most ordinary families. Friends and neighbors recall that Emma was always first at everything. Their parents took pride in her achievements. Emma not only earned the best grades in school, but also easily connected with other kids, while Sophie remained in the background. The age and personality differences made her the perpetual second. This feeling only deepened as Emma was constantly praised, and Sophie was always left in the shadows. One close family friend recalls, "Emma was the shining star. I remember how her parents always talked about her accomplishments, and Sophie seemed to always be on the sidelines. They never said it outright, but it was clear they were prouder of Emma." By 1999, as Emma became a teenager, her image as the perfect student only solidified. She began winning school awards and gaining attention from everyone around her. Sophie, meanwhile, as she neared her own teenage years, grew increasingly resentful and rebellious. At this age, the conflict between the sisters escalated. What had once seemed like harmless rivalry turned into open hostility. The parents tried to maintain balance, but their focus on Emma's success only further alienated Sophie. Emma graduates from high school with honors, preparing to head off to college. At the graduation ceremony, 14-year-old Sophie shows her first clear sign of jealousy. She leaves early, avoiding any congratulatory moments with her sister. This event marks a point of no return in their relationship. Sophie begins to withdraw more and more, seeking attention through unpredictable behaviors, engaging in risky relationships and friendships. Neighbors recall, after that graduation, a rift formed between the sisters. Emma went off to study at a prestigious university, while Sophie stayed behind in town, feeling like nobody. It was obvious to everyone who knew them. Emma returns to Silver Creek after several years of studying and successfully starting her career in real estate. Soon she meets Lucas Hansen, who works as a lawyer at a small but well-respected law firm. Their relationship blossoms quickly, and in October 2020, they marry in a large ceremony that becomes the talk of the town. Emma and Lucas buy a home in an upscale part of Silver Creek. Everything seems perfect. Both are thriving in their careers, actively participating in the town's social scene. They frequently host dinner parties, gathering friends and colleagues. In the eyes of others, their marriage appears to be the picture of perfection. Everything about their lives seems harmonious and peaceful, but beneath this facade, cracks were starting to form. Lucas's friends recall, "Lucas was very successful in his work, but I think he always felt the pressure to be flawless. Everyone knew he was stressed about his career. He tried hard to be the perfect husband for Emma, but over time, that pressure built up. Emma also began to notice their relationship becoming more formal. Lucas was spending more and more time at work, while Emma tried to maintain the appearance of happiness. This was only the beginning of the looming crisis in their marriage. After many years away, Sophie returns to Silver Creek. During that time, she had hardly kept in touch with her family, moving from one city to another. She came back more confident, but shrouded in mystery. Those who knew her before immediately noticed the changes in her behavior. Sophie was no longer the vulnerable girl they remembered. She appeared strong, but also unstable. Neighbors noted Sophie was always different, but when she returned, there was something unsettling about her. She rarely talked about where she'd been or what she'd done all those years. But there was this strange coldness in her. In October 2022, Sophie moves in with Emma and Lucas under the pretense of looking for work and starting fresh. Despite their old grievances, Emma decides to support her sister and offers to let her stay with them for a while. But this was just the beginning of new problems. One of Emma's friends recalls, Emma always tried to help Sophie despite their past conflicts. She thought her sister had changed, that they could rebuild their relationship. But Sophie was no longer the person people remembered. As Sophie settles back into town, strange things start to happen. She behaves mysteriously, often disappearing for days at a time, and her words don't always match her actions. Each day, the tension between the sisters grows, and Sophie begins showing an interest in Lucas, which becomes the catalyst for the catastrophe that would soon unfold. Silver Creek, once a quiet and peaceful town, began to notice dark changes, though no one yet realized the true danger Sophie posed. On October 5, 2022, Sophie moved into Emma and Lucas's home with the promise of starting over. She explained her decision as a desire to rebuild her relationship with her sister and find a new job in Silver Creek. Emma, hopeful for better family relations, agreed to take her sister in, unaware that her life was about to change forever. At first, life in the Hanson household went as planned. Sophie was friendly and tried to help around the house. However, after a few weeks, her presence began to feel oppressive. Neighbors recalled that Sophie was often home alone while Emma and Lucas were at work, and her behavior became increasingly strange. We noticed Sophie standing by the window for hours, staring into space or writing in a notebook. She hardly interacted with anyone, as if she was lost in her own thoughts. By late October 2022, tensions in the house had escalated. Lucas began noticing that Sophie was frequently seeking excuses to be alone with him. She would ask for help with her resume or seek career advice. At first, this seemed innocent, but over time it became clear that her attention towards him extended beyond friendship. Emma also began sensing that the atmosphere at home was changing. Sophie displayed an excessive emotional dependence on Lucas and increasingly inserted herself into their conversations. Interviews with Emma's close friends revealed that it gradually became evident Sophie's return was no coincidence. We had known Sophie since childhood, and her behavior was always unstable. But when she came back to Silver Creek, she wasn't the same Sophie we knew. She acted like she had an agenda, like she was after something. Over time, it became obvious that Sophie was manipulating the situation. She wasn't just trying to get close to Lucas, but was using his vulnerabilities and career struggles to deepen her influence over him. During this period, Lucas was facing difficulties at work. His law practice was in crisis, and he began doubting his professional abilities. Sophie skillfully played on these insecurities. She offered him emotional support, talked with him about his problems, and sometimes stayed with him late into the night. Lucas found relief in Sophie's company, as Emma was busy with her career and often didn't give him enough attention. However, Sophie subtly shifted her role in Lucas's life, from the vulnerable younger sister to the seductress, gradually eroding his emotional connection to Emma. She began to flirt with him, but did so subtly that Lucas didn't realize what was happening at first. This led to a dual tension. On the surface, he maintained his marriage to Emma, but internally, he started to feel drawn to Sophie. On one hand, Sophie was working to destroy Emma's marriage, but her motives went beyond simple seduction. Psychologists who studied the case explained her actions as an attempt to control those who had once dominated her life. She had always felt that Emma was ahead of her, and now it was time for her to take revenge and assert control over the family that had once rejected her. Sophie's manipulations became more overt. She began using blackmail, threatening to expose their increasingly intense encounters. Under the guise of support, she gained more and more emotional control over him. Lucas felt trapped, but his fear of ruining his life compelled him to comply. An interview with a criminal psychology expert shed light on Sophie's behavior. Sophie was an expert manipulator. She exploited Lucas's vulnerabilities to completely capture his attention. This is typical behavior for someone with narcissistic or borderline personality disorder. She wasn't just seeking physical closeness. She wanted complete control over someone who could give her a sense of power. Throughout the winter of 2022, the situation only worsened. Sophie and Lucas spent more and more time together. Emma noticed their closeness, but didn't fully grasp the extent of what was happening. By early 2023, the tension in the Hansen household had reached a breaking point. Emma began noticing oddities that at first seemed minor, but their frequency raised her concerns. She noticed that certain items in the house would disappear or be found in the wrong places. At first, it was small things, missing jewelry or documents, but eventually more significant items began to vanish. In the evenings, Emma overheard hushed conversations from another room, but when she entered, she would only find Sophie, seemingly busy with her own things. Things became more alarming when Emma started noticing frequent late-night calls to Lucas's phone. Each time she asked who was calling, he would respond evasively or claim they were work-related. These small inconsistencies began taking a toll on her mental state. Emma tried to find logical explanations, but with each passing day, her suspicions only grew. Sophie, in turn, actively used these moments to create tension between Emma and Lucas. She manipulated Emma, making subtle comments that caused her to doubt her perception of reality. Sophie would intentionally bring up topics that triggered Emma's anxieties, pushing her toward the idea that she was losing control over her life. Emma's friends recalled, "She would often talk to us about the strange things happening at home. She felt like she was losing control of the situation, but couldn't figure out what exactly was going on. She started to think she was going crazy." During this time, Lucas grew more distant. His late nights at work and increasing secrecy gave Emma even more reason to suspect something was wrong, though she couldn't piece together the full picture. Meanwhile, Sophie was doing everything she could to drive a wedge between them, feeding Emma's suspicions and deepening the emotional divide. From the moment Sophie began manipulating Lucas, their relationship gradually evolved from innocent conversations to more intimate encounters. It all started with discussions about his work struggles and growing feelings of isolation in his marriage to Emma. Sophie used these moments to get closer to him emotionally, offering him the support and understanding he felt he was no longer getting from his wife. One such encounter took place in February 2023, when Sophie suggested they spend the evening together to help him sort through some documents. The evening began with casual conversation but slowly escalated into something more. Sophie carefully guided their dialogue, bringing up topics that touched on his emotions and feelings. Lucas didn't immediately realize he was being drawn into Sophie's carefully laid trap. These weren't just conversations, one of Lucas's friends recalls. She knew how to play on his emotions. At first, it all seemed innocent, but soon he started talking about her like she was his salvation. Over time, their meetings became more frequent and intimate. They began secretly meeting at night, taking advantage of Emma's absence. Sophie skillfully played on Lucas's attraction, stirring emotions in him that he had long suppressed. She made him feel special, devoted only to her, creating a growing dependency on their relationship. By this point, their affair had evolved into a full-blown romance. Sophie and Lucas began meeting in secluded places, carefully avoiding attention. They used vacant homes that Emma was selling as a realtor to stay hidden. These meetings became a regular part of their lives, and the deeper they sank into the affair, the harder it was for Lucas to maintain the facade of a normal life with Emma. By March 2023, their relationship reached a dangerous turning point when Sophie began urging Lucas to spend more time with her and less with Emma. She even suggested they leave town together and start a new life, far from the problems surrounding them. Psychology experts who studied the case pointed out, Sophie used classic manipulative tactics. She gave Lucas the illusion of safety and happiness, something he could no longer find in his marriage. She gradually turned him into her puppet, making him feel indebted to her. As their relationship deepened, the atmosphere in the Hansen household grew increasingly tense. Emma could feel that something was off but couldn't find any evidence of what was happening. This tension was building up to a tragedy that would eventually destroy all of their lives. By spring 2023, Emma not only felt emotionally distant from her husband, but also began noticing strange behavior from her sister. Sophie acted too confident and mysterious, leaving behind a trail of questions that Emma couldn't answer. Lucas's odd behavior, his vague explanations for late returns home, and tense phone conversations began to erode Emma's peace of mind. Things took an even darker turn when Emma started finding strange and out-of-place items in their home. Unfamiliar perfume on the bedsheets, cryptic notes left on her desk. One letter contained a phrase she had heard Sophie say before, as if it was an intentional hint. Each new discovery made Emma doubt her own perception of reality, and whenever she tried to discuss her concerns with Lucas, he brushed them off, accusing her of being overly dramatic. I remember Emma started getting nervous over small things, one of her friends recalls. She was tense and said she felt lost in her own home. But every time she tried to talk to Lucas, he'd dismiss it like it was nothing. Sophie masterfully exploited every opportunity to stoke Emma's doubts. She deliberately left clues that seemed too obvious, as if she were toying with Emma, testing her resilience. Photos appeared in the house, showing blurry silhouettes resembling Lucas and Sophie, and notes were found in Emma's belongings that were clearly meant for her, but lacked direct meaning. These discoveries left Emma confused, making her question whether she was imagining things or if her mind was playing tricks on her. After months of growing suspicion, Emma decided to hire a private investigator, Laura Green. Known for her investigations in nearby towns, Laura was familiar with psychological manipulation and had dealt with similar situations before. Emma felt she needed someone outside the situation to confirm or deny her fears. Laura immediately suspected that there was more to this story than just a family drama. After several weeks of surveillance and analysis of Sophie's behavior, Laura found evidence that Emma's suspicions were not unfounded. She uncovered a pattern of Sophie wreaking havoc in the lives of other men across different towns. What initially appeared to be coincidences, broken relationships, affairs, financial problems, soon connected to a larger pattern, with Sophie at the center of it all. Laura discovered old court documents revealing that Sophie had a history of being involved in the destruction of marriages and the lives of several men. Even more shockingly, Laura learned that Sophie had been in a relationship with Emma's former fiancé years ago, and that affair had ended in scandal. Emma's fiancé had abruptly disappeared from town after being caught cheating, with none other than Sophie. We started digging into Sophie's past and uncovered a trail that stretched across the country, Laura Green explains. Her actions weren't random. She was a master at destroying families, using her relationships with men to gain power over them. This discovery was a devastating blow for Emma. She realized that Sophie hadn't come back into her life by chance. This was revenge, carefully planned and executed over the years. Sophie had harbored resentment since Emma had always overshadowed her, and now she had returned to destroy everything her sister had built. As the truth about Sophie came to light, Laura Green continued her investigation, uncovering even more evidence that Sophie had used her manipulative abilities to tear apart people's lives. Laura realized that Sophie wasn't just seeking revenge. She was pathologically addicted to controlling others. Emma found herself at the center of a complex game, with Sophie as the expert player and her life as the ultimate prize. The climax of these events drew closer as Emma realized she could no longer trust anyone, not even her own husband. The investigation led by Laura Green uncovered a startling truth. Sophie wasn't merely obsessed with destroying Emma's life. Her actions ran deeper and darker than originally thought. Sophie had lived her entire life feeling that Emma had stolen her fate. Everything she could have had, Emma possessed. This wasn't just jealousy over success or marriage. For Sophie, it became a personal crusade for vengeance. It became clear that Sophie's behavior was driven not only by envy but also by deep psychological instability. Her entire life had been filled with drama, centered around the men she tried to control. Each of her relationships followed the same pattern. She would capture their attention, create emotional dependency, and then destroy their lives through affairs and manipulation. This was her ingrained behavioral pattern, rooted in her psychological issues. Psychologists involved in the case proposed theories about Sophie's possible disorders. Sophie exhibited signs of narcissistic personality disorder. She constantly craved attention and validation, but couldn't maintain healthy relationships. She sought dramatic power struggles in relationships where she could control everyone around her. It was her way of asserting her significance. Psychiatrists suggested that her motivation to destroy Emma's life stemmed from a deep sense of injustice. Sophie felt that her destiny had been stolen, and she was intent on exacting revenge by taking away from her sister what she believed was rightfully hers. Amid increasingly intense encounters with Lucas, Sophie began to feel that her grip on the situation was slipping. Lucas, overwhelmed with guilt, started trying to distance himself from her, but Sophie had no intention of letting him go. Her obsession with Lucas turned into paranoia, and she began blackmailing him with threats to expose their affair. Sophie threatened to tell Emma everything unless he stayed with her. She emotionally manipulated him, claiming that he was the only one who could save her from her destructive life. It was a classic case of emotional blackmail, said one of the therapists who studied the case. She used his guilt and fear to keep him close. She threatened not only his marriage but his career and reputation as well. Lucas found himself trapped. He could no longer control what was happening and felt his life was crumbling. He was under intense pressure, knowing that if the truth about the affair came out, it would destroy not only his relationship with Emma, but his career too. He felt caught between Sophie and his conscience, unable to find a way out of their toxic relationship. By September 2023, Emma began noticing more and more oddities in both Lucas and Sophie's behavior. Her suspicions were confirmed when she accidentally discovered messages between them on Lucas's phone. This was the final straw. Emma realized that Sophie hadn't just interfered in her life, she had intentionally been working to destroy it. Emma decided to take action and prepared for a direct confrontation with her sister. On the evening of September 14th, Emma confronted Sophie, demanding explanations for everything she had found. The situation quickly spiraled out of control. Emma furiously accused Sophie of betrayal, of trying to destroy her family. But instead of apologizing, Sophie threatened Emma, declaring that Lucas had long belonged to her. She insisted that Emma didn't deserve her life and that now she was going to lose everything. The conversation escalated into a brutal verbal battle, during which Sophie revealed her dark motives. She didn't just want to ruin Emma's marriage. She wanted to take her place, to strip away everything Emma had that Sophie believed should have been hers. This confrontation became the climax of the conflict, with all the secrets and hidden motives finally coming to light. Having lost control of the situation, Sophie became increasingly aggressive, and Emma realized that her sister posed a real threat. That night, an unresolved tension settled between them, setting the stage for the tragic events that would soon unfold. The family party that Emma and Lucas hosted was intended to be an attempt to restore harmony in their relationship and return to their old life. But beneath the festive facade, a tension simmered that was about to explode. Emma had made a firm decision to expose the truth about Lucas and Sophie's affair in front of everyone. She wanted to put an end to the lies and manipulation that were destroying her life. As the evening reached its peak, Emma stepped forward and began to speak about the betrayal. However, before she could reveal the full truth, Sophie intervened. She was prepared for this moment and began blackmailing Emma, Lucas, and even some of the guests, prominent people in town whose secrets she knew. It turned out that Sophie had not only been manipulating her family, but had also entangled other men in Silver Creek, engaging in affairs and collecting damaging information. Laura Green, the private investigator Emma had hired, found evidence that Sophie had been wrecking more than just Lucas and Emma's lives. With her help, it became clear that Sophie had been controlling the fates of several men over the years, manipulating their relationships and threatening exposure. This evening marked the culmination of her long-standing schemes. The final blow came when Sophie and Emma erupted into a furious physical confrontation in front of the guests. Emma was ready to expose the truth, but in her desperation, Sophie provoked her into a physical altercation. In the heat of the struggle, Sophie pushed Emma down the stairs. Emma struck her head on the stone steps and died instantly. Sophie tried to pass it off as an accident, but Laura Green and several witnesses quickly realized it was no simple mishap. After Emma's tragic death, Sophie attempted to stage it as a fatal fall, hoping her plan would remain concealed. However, Laura Green had already gathered enough evidence to disprove this version of events. Witnesses at the party had seen the entire altercation, leaving Sophie with no chance of evading justice. The police arrested her on the spot. The trial of Sophie became a media sensation. During the proceedings, prosecutors presented indisputable evidence of her manipulation, blackmail, and premeditated murder of Emma. The case was complicated by Sophie's history. Numerous accounts of ruined lives and families from other towns surfaced, with testimonies from men Sophie had used to achieve her goals. Court experts provided their assessment. Sophie suffered from both narcissistic and borderline personality disorders, manifesting in her pathological need for control over others. However, these diagnoses didn't serve as mitigating factors in the case. Prosecutors argued that her actions were intentional and that she consciously sought to destroy her sister's life. The court sentenced Sophie to 25 years in prison for premeditated murder and multiple counts of blackmail. The town was shaken by this conclusion, knowing that Silver Creek would forever remember the Wilson sisters and their tragic story. In an interview, Laura Green shed light on Sophie's true motives. She emphasized that this wasn't just about an affair. It was a meticulously planned revenge. Sophie had been plotting for years to ruin her sister's life. She wanted to take everything from her family, her reputation, and ultimately her life. Laura Green also recalled how the investigation revealed the devastating consequences Sophie had left behind. Numerous destroyed lives and families. Her obsession with controlling people proved to be deeper and more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Lucas Hansen, having survived the trial and lost his wife, remained in a deep emotional and moral crisis. His life was utterly shattered, and though he avoided legal charges, he could no longer reclaim his place in society. The story of the Wilson sisters became a true tragedy for Silver Creek, altering the lives of not only those directly involved, but the entire town. The residents would remember this case for years as a stark reminder of how far envy and hatred could go, lurking behind the facade of family.